targeted for termination.
Where does it want me? Why me?
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator. Your future is in its hands.
Another trailer that gave away everything.
Yeah.
It didn't give away that much, but that was excessively long, it felt like.
Yeah, that was almost 2 minutes. So yeah, that's
Okay.
pretty long for a trailer.
Maybe we're just impatient these days.
Maybe.
Well, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about the 1984 classic, The Terminator.
Well-deserved. The title
Well-deserved.
classic.
Yes. Yeah. I've seen this movie before. I saw it really young as a kid. I loved it then. I love it even more now, actually, believe it or not. Like, I haven't seen it in so long. And
Yeah, me either.
rewatching it for the first time in God knows how long. It just is so well done and such a cool movie. And, like, the time travel aspect stuck out to me way more in this viewing. Like, the paradox and all that crap.
Right.
Like, it seemed way more apparent to me this time than it did my previous viewing of so long ago.
Yeah. Like going into it, the Terminator franchise is, I think, famous for being one where the sequel absolutely blows the original out of the water in terms of like every aspect of being better.
Yeah.
But like this movie absolutely holds up really well. Even like the effects are obviously not like incredible, but a lot of the scenes, especially when you get to see the upper half of the Terminator walking through the factory and like its legs walking up the steps and stuff, are like, it looks unbelievably good. So like the studio that did the effects on this movie really did a good job.
With Stan Winston, who's famous for a ton of awesome stuff. And he did like a lot of the effects. I mean, yeah, the stop motion's a little goofy. That's the only complaint.
Yeah, I don't know what that was about, because they have the like obviously like a really well done Terminator that like I get like filming that's really difficult, because
apparently it was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, so
and it was heavy as shit. The endoskeleton.
Yeah, I bet, because it looks like it's probably real metal. Like I don't know how else you'd fake that.
Yeah. Yeah, Stan Winston is a legend. He also did the makeup and stuff for the sequel as well. And like you said, the sequel is definitely leaps and bounds better than this one. Not saying this movie's bad, obviously, by any means. Like we said, it's a classic. But, you know, when it comes to sequels aren't usually the best. And obviously Terminator 2 is better, in my opinion. But this one holds up super well. And it's cutting edge, especially for its budget. It was a low budget kind of, guerrilla style filmmaking from James Cameron. He literally would shoot scenes without permits, real late or real early in the morning so he could get away with these shots. And he would do them until literally like the police were called and he would get the shot, which is super cool. Like, I mean, that's super badass. He comes from a Roger Corman background, who's a famous director who did a bunch of B movies, and he learned a lot of technique from him, which is really cool. I don't know if you've ever seen any Roger Corman movies, but I don't think so. They're a little goofy and like kind of corny, but but that's the style Roger Corman was going for. So again, Cameron learned a lot of cool techniques from him. And he wrote the screenplay. He's a really good, just all around director and writer.
Yeah, I think the overall plot of this movie is extremely well thought out. This movie does a great job of like setting up the lore of this like alternate dystopian timeline that will eventually happen. Because obviously it actually takes place in 1984, but there's a lot of awesome like world building in this movie that's obviously expanded on in Terminator 2. But really good job, really good writing.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about Terminator 2 a lot in this, but there's, like you said, a lot of world building, and I didn't realize all the world building it did until I rewatched it just for this viewing, and I was like, holy shit, like that ties so well into Terminator 2, and it's really well done, really good writing, and what's crazy is, James Cameron, he sold this pack. He tried selling himself and the movie. Like, he was only going to make this movie if he directed it. And Gail Ann Hurd, which was his producing partner, she was like, that's the only way they were going to make the movie, is if he directed it and like she produced it, and like that was the only way they were going to sell it. Which he's basically a first-time director almost. And he makes this and just fucking kicks ass and blows it out of the water.
Yeah.
It's impressive. And I find it interesting that, the trailer we just watched, obviously voiceover, which is classic for 80s, it really it accentuates the sci-fi and action genre that it is. But honestly, like watching it now, it's a horror movie. It really is.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Yeah, it really is. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was how like the beginning of the movie is almost like a serial killer movie, that someone's going after women named Sarah Connor. And it's not until maybe like close to halfway through the movie that you actually find out that Schwarzenegger is a robot.
Yeah. Yes.
Like,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and like, again, watching this now, I didn't realize how many of the like classic lines and the classic tropes of this movie were like completely misremembered most of the time, and like kind of taken for granted. Like the whole aspect of him being a Terminator from the future like really isn't revealed to you until like halfway through the movie. Like, yeah. So yeah, for most of the movie, you think that this guy's just trying to kill women named Sarah Connor. Like, yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, there's some weird sci-fi stuff happening. Like, there's lightning striking and the naked guy appears, but like you have no idea what's going on until Kyle Reese actually explains what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's like, that's why I'm definitely going to stress, like, people who have seen this movie, rewatch it if you haven't seen it in a while, because it fucking rocks. Yeah. And it's like, like you said, I took it for granted for sure. I was just like, I always, was like, T2 is end all be all. Like, this movie I could watch. It's top 5 movie for me, T2. Like this one, I was just like, holy shit. Okay. Like, I need to give this more credit than I've been giving it in the past. Yeah. But like the whole serial killer thing, and like, it's like a slasher, and it was almost, it's like, he wanted it to be a slasher. There's so much cool like background on it. And the beginning also kind of has a nod that I want to talk to, speaking of slasher, to the night slasher in Cobra, the movie we reviewed recently. Yeah. Brian Thompson is one of the punks in the beginning. That he gets his fucking like heart stomach punched through,
Yeah.
gets wrecked. Like that, yeah. So that's a cool little. I just love that connection, and Bill Paxton's obviously one of the punks in it as well, which is cool. But I like how they play the dynamic and contrast of Arnold being this perfect specimen, if you will, versus Kyle Reese not being perfect. Like, for example, Arnold comes in a perfect sphere, and he's, knelt down perfectly and looks up and is just, chiseled and, fucking jacked. And you got Kyle Reese, who comes in and like bounces off a fire escape and gets, rocked right away. And I don't know, it's a cool contrast. And it's interesting because the producer for this, one of the producers for this movie, or for the studio, wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to be Kyle Reese.
Oh, interesting.
And they set up a meeting between Cameron and Schwarzenegger, and like Cameron was like, I'm going to derail this meeting. Like, I don't want to meet this guy. Like, this guy's completely wrong for the part. And he's like, he literally wanted to like pick a fight with him and then tell the studio, like, fuck this guy. Like, I'm not working with him. And, much to his surprise, they actually hit it off, obviously, with all the movies they've made. And, obviously this one being made, but they hit it off. And Arnold was like, basically talking about how much he loved the script and how this is how the Terminator should act. And this is how he should be. And then that convinced James Cameron to be like, oh, like, you're the fucking Terminator.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like, imagine, if he wasn't, because this literally defined Arnold Schwarzenegger for his entire career.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that's really cool about the way that Cameron did this movie and then the sequel is the inversion of Schwarzenegger's character. I was talking to my cousin once about, these movies, and he was like, when I was in the theater watching Terminator 2, and there's a scene in the hallway in the mall where Schwarzenegger walks around the corner, drops a flower box and pulls out a gun, and everyone's like, oh shit. And then he says, come with me if you want to live. Then everyone was really like, oh shit. Like,
yeah, that's so
he's
cool.
The good guy now. Like, it's super cool. And there's one of the things that's actually pretty interesting about this is there's some parallels between that like initial scene where the main character, either Sarah Connor or John Connor, comes in contact with the Terminator for the first time, where the Terminator is like moving towards them, and the person that's been sent to protect them has a shotgun and shoots them multiple times and says, come with me if you want to live. It's very parallel and very awesome. And extremely cool.
Yeah, and they both go through a window.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like Arnold gets out of the Tech Noir club and lands on the ground, and then, the T-1000 in Terminator 2 gets shot through Arnold actually goes through the window again in Terminator 2, and he's on the ground.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, through the arcade.
Yeah, a good parallel there. Yeah, it's crazy because, you think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, you don't think of him as a good actor in a sense, but he honestly really is.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know if it's just because, like, he has maybe 5 lines in this movie.
14.
I think
it's 14.
Oh, okay, that's not a lot for being like the top billed actor in the movie. But I mean, like, I think that's like one of the things that may have stereotyped him as like not a good actor. And like, honestly, he plays a robot extremely well. Like, but that's the point. Like, he's supposed to be believable as a person only to the extent of seeing him, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you're not supposed to, like, there's supposed to be something off because he's a robot. And I think he does that extremely well.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of goes back to our last movie, Bloodsport, and how I was saying that, all these, stars in the 80s are big macho dudes with huge muscles that can't speak English very well. That also kind of makes you think, oh, because they don't speak English very well, they're not a very good actor, which is,
right.
Not fair, honestly. Like,
no,
I thought, I thought he was awesome as the villain, and he's great as the hero, obviously, in Terminator 2.
Yeah, I mean, and like, we'll get to it eventually, I'm sure, but like, he's awesome in Predator and like some of the other like big 80s movies that he's in. So like,
I can't wait to do him.
The stereotype thing of him not being a good actor, I think, is a little bit overblown.
Agreed. And I'm a huge Schwarzenegger fan. I've said this multiple times. I grew up on him. He was my go-to action star of the 80s and early 90s. Like, I was obsessed with all his movies, and I was so excited to obviously do this one, and I can't wait to do the other ones, like you said, like Predator, Commando, Running Man. I mean, they're all awesome.
Yeah. I think part of it too might just be his accent, because like all of his like great one-liners are all like kind of comedic, but only comedic because of the way he says things, like "get to the chopper," like that kind of stuff, or "I'll be back."
And look how much that's in pop culture, and how everyone tries to replicate that voice, which is crazy. Like, that's such a part of American pop culture because of this movie in the 80s.
Yeah,
it
so
literally
iconic.
Started and stemmed from this. And that's literally the point of this entire podcast, in my opinion, is how this pop culture, is amazing, and how it started a bunch of awesome stuff and ridiculous movies, and how we need to revisit them because they're awesome. And this is literally case in point, this movie.
Right. Yeah. Well, like, that's what, another thing that like, really I was not like prepared for was, I don't know why. I don't know. It's probably because it's misquoted and misrepresented all the time, but the "I'll be back" scene is like not at the end of the movie.
No.
Like, I think a lot of people think that he says "I'll be back."
Interesting.
Like, as he dies or something. But that's not the case at all.
It's a good common misconception because, again, it's like a horror movie where you've got this unstoppable killing machine that will return and says, "I'll be back." You know what I mean? That's like a classic slasher trope. And again, like Cameron was so surprised, like, all the viewers thought this movie was purely an action movie because he shot it like a horror movie, obviously. And that's where he's like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to make action movies from now on.
Yeah.
And he obviously killed it at a lot of these action movies.
Yeah. I mean, to get back to the slasher, like, horror movie aspect of this, like, they do the, they almost take the supernatural horror villain thing and apply it multiple times, where he gets shot by a shotgun like 7 times and sits back up and starts coming after him again. He gets lit on fire and like his skin melts off, and the robot just stands up in the middle of like a exploding like gasoline truck or whatever and chases after them. Like, it's like, I would consider this a horror movie. I would consider Terminator 2 an action movie.
100%. And think about it. It's exactly like the Aliens 2 movies in contrast. Alien 1 is a horror movie. Aliens 2, or Aliens, directed by Cameron as well, is a war action movie.
Yes.
It's a very cool, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't want to say synonym, but it's not.
I mean, they're parallel, I think, kind of.
That works. Thank you.
Like franchises and directions of the franchise. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you know, there's a lot of jump scares, like the fucking pet iguana,
Yes.
like breathing Komodo dragon or whatever the hell it is,
Right.
jumping in, or, you know, like that. That's pretty cool. There's like POV and like, you know, he's like stalking them, which is,
right.
you know, it's so horror-esque. And I never knew that until I watched it this time. Because I watched it really young.
Yeah, same.
For sure.
Like, even the beginning sequences with like the machines and the hunter killers like flying around and driving around, like the tank thing is like crushing piles of human skulls like stuff like that. Like, it's really like creepy and kind of like very horror-esque, and like trying to paint this very like scary dystopian nightmare vision of the future. So yeah, it's really cool, and it's one of the few things that melds sci-fi, action, and horror very well together. I would think the Alien franchise is probably another like prime example of that.
Yeah, definitely. And like it's even in that trailer we watched with the whole monologue that Kyle Reese has about how the Terminator doesn't eat, sleep, you know, he doesn't feel pain, he has no remorse, like all that. Like that's such a cool monologue, and they say it in the trailer, and that's like a straight up killer from the fucking 80s, like Freddy Krueger or like, you know, Jason Voorhees. It's the same style.
Yeah, one of the things too that's really, really neat is kind of the, I don't know how to put it other than it's like the dehumanization of the Terminator throughout the movie. Like early on, he's just like pristine, like comb over, like very you know, like picture perfect, and as the movie progresses, like he loses his eyebrows, his hair gets like blown out, he's like starts losing pieces of his skin, and like by the end he's just a robot like trying to kill them, and like it's this very cool like gradual removal of like the things that make him appear to be human.
So it's breaking down the character, literally.
Right. Yeah.
It's really cool. And like the whole scene of him, you know, where he's all busted up and he's, you know, got his arm and he's got the machine under his arm. Like Stan Winston created all these effects and stuff, and just they're so well done. And then they have that kind of dummy of him where he's cutting his eye open, which is so crazy and cool. And apparently, you know, I think this is a cool fact that I read about is Arnold went to like on a lunch break, he went like into LA and like to go get food, and he forgot he had the crazy makeup on. And imagine that in the 80s where it's just like the guy's got a fucking robot eye and like half his cheeks missing and shit, and like he's got no eyebrows, and you're just like, what the fuck? It's cool. And there's a lot of cool scenes in this movie, you know, like just it's a chase scene. The whole movie's basically a chase for the most part. Like T2 is one giant chase. But like this is, it's so well done. And just the world building, like you said, and the whole, how the future and how it ties into the present and the past and like all this stuff. And like with John Connor giving Kyle Reese the photo of Sarah Connor, and he basically mind fucked his dad into fucking his mom.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's literally what happens.
Right.
It's like, he just knows that, like, yeah, you're my dad. Just go get the job done. Like,
yeah.
But like, imagine that. Like, he didn't even tell him that, like, he had to keep all this a secret. And like, all that ties really well together in the end, where Sarah gets her picture taken, you know, and she's not looking, and that's the picture John gives to Kyle, and how it all ties back, which is so cool.
And Kyle in one point even says like that she looks sad in the picture. Yeah. And like at the point where the picture's taken is because she's kind of mourning his death or like monologuing about it. Really well, good, like not tying on by the writing, you know.
And I'm sure she's mourning her friends that got wrecked in her apartment.
Oh, yeah.
And also her mom. Her
Yeah,
mom got fucking destroyed. Like,
yeah.
that whole scene where he, like, is at their cabin in Big Bear and, like, you see there's, like, legs up against the wall.
Yeah.
And there's, like, the apartment is just destroyed and he's imitating her mom's voice, which is crazy. Seeing that
the
blew
voice,
my fucking mind for the first time.
Yeah, the voice imitation, which carries into the sequel too, is pretty cool. And like, I think it's just an added, like, feature of like how scary the Terminators really are. You know, like, it's like it could have been fine just having it be a killing machine, but instead it's like, oh no, this thing can also like imitate people and like, you know, make you like perfectly too, like, you know. But so one of the other things I think is a cool parallel, since we're talking about that, is the there's I don't even know if flashback or flash forward, one way or the other, into the future, where Kyle's kind of telling Sarah about the future and like how they have to live in these like kind of like bunker things, and like it's shitty and everybody's starving and, you know, whatever. But he says that they use dogs to pick up who's a real person and who's a Terminator. And the in the sequel, John Connor's dog is like going ballistic through the entire scene where the T-1000 kills his foster parents. And I think it's a cool like carryover or like nod to that you know, point in the first movie about how the dogs can kind of sniff them out.
Yeah, I totally picked up on that as well, and I didn't realize that until watching it again and being like, oh shit. Yeah, like, oh, what's wrong with, you know, the dog's name is Max. He's like, what's wrong with Wolfie? Which is a cool Easter egg that was literally the dog in this Terminator movie. The dog that is at the motel that that Sarah and Kyle are at. That dog that's outside that spots the Terminator, and that's where they're like, oh shit, we gotta get out of here. That dog is James Cameron's, and its name is Wolfie. And I think that's it's cool. A cool little Easter egg, because, you know, Arnold in the sequel says, what's wrong with Wolfie, in order to figure out if that's the, you know, T-1000 that's, you know, taken over his step-parents or foster parents.
Yeah.
But again, writing super well done. Production was postponed on this movie because Arnold had to do Conan and Conan the Destroyer. And during this time, like, Cameron was like, oh, I got to do some stuff. Like, I need to have work. I need to pay my bills. So 20th Century Fox commissioned him to write some other movies because they liked his work on this movie. And he wrote that, you know, he wrote Aliens, which was 2 years after this movie. He also wrote, and I had no idea about this, Rambo: First Blood Part 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had no idea. And like,
that's cool.
It's interesting because obviously Arnold and Sylvester Stallone are big, you know, rivals in this time.
Yeah.
And Rambo is, you know, one of Stallone's claim to fame, and obviously Terminator is Schwarzenegger's claim to fame. So I like had no idea. And it's just crazy because he balanced out, and he was also kind of tweaking Terminator, and he would write the different movies that are all completely different tones, if you will. Yeah. But similar 80s action movies, but just crazy.
Yeah, that's really neat. I never knew that.
Yeah. And there's actually a really good Netflix documentary on it, like how movies were made, I think is what it's called. And there's one on Terminator, and it's really good.
Oh, cool.
I'm pretty sure. There's one on Aliens, at least, as well. And yeah, there's a lot of cool, fun behind the scenes trivia. Like, they literally considered, they were considering O.J. Simpson to be the Terminator. And the reason, and the best part is, the reason they didn't choose him
is really good at cutting heads off? No.
Well, the funny thing is, they were like, we don't think he's a cold-blooded killer. Like, he's too nice. Yikes. So,
and he just did The Naked Gun, so.
Yeah, which I can't wait to do that movie. We're going to probably do that one soon. That's one of the all-time best comedies. Yeah, I can't believe he's in that. It's so random.
I know.
But yeah, what's crazy is, we should definitely talk about the sequels of this movie. Besides Terminator 2, I think Terminator 3 is okay. You get further along, all the sequels get worse and worse and worse. And the crazy thing is, after Terminator 2, so Terminator 3 and on, James Cameron saw no residuals, no money from any of the Terminator movies.
Huh. That's interesting.
Which is crazy. Because the most of the movies, made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Terminator 3 made good money. Terminator Salvation was decent. And then you start to go on a decline with box office returns, which I really want them to revitalize it. And I have an awesome idea of how to do it, in my opinion. I don't want to share it on here because I don't want anyone stealing the idea. Not that it's ever going to get made, but I'm not going to put it out there. But I'll talk to you after. And if people want to comment and hear it, they can DM me. I don't care. But the sequels aren't great. The rights eventually did revert back to Cameron in 2019, and that's when he started to do Dark Fate, which I personally didn't like the newest one. I thought it wasn't good.
I don't think I even saw it because I did not hear good things about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not good. But this movie, and like Aliens, it's a kind of another parallel to that franchise. This is a very strong female character-centric film. And it was, James Cameron wasn't trying to make a feminist style movie. He was just trying to make an awesome movie with a woman in the lead role and an action role because it had never really been done before. And, hats off to him because... Exactly, yeah. But that was not necessarily an action movie. He wanted an action female star. But yeah, and then Aliens comes out and he makes Sigourney Weaver an action star as well. So, I don't know, it's cool to see that, in the 80s, these women were kicking ass. And, a lot of movies tried to replicate it and didn't do nearly as good of a job as these movies in James Cameron's movies.
Yeah, well, and the transformation of Sarah Connor from, mild-mannered waitress to, M16 toting badass in T2 is, super cool.
Well, what's cool is, Kyle Reese alludes to this too, and I didn't realize this until obviously the rewatch, is he's like, oh yeah, Sarah Connor's a fucking legend.
Yeah.
She's a legend.
Well, he tells her that she trains John on how to fight.
Yeah, exactly. And again, ties so well into T2 and it's the ultimate fucking sequel.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed is that the psychiatrist is the same from T1 to T2, which I didn't notice before.
Oh, what? Oh, dude, yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen the first Terminator. Same.
Yeah, a lot of iconic lines obviously from this movie too, and Arnold just I love the part where he's in the bedroom and he just you see his POV and it's going down the list of responses and it's fuck you, asshole. Just I love that because they actually use that fuck you, asshole in a ton of other Arnold movies.
Oh, yeah.
Commando, it's in Commando, it's in Total Recall, it's used a lot with this movie. So it's kind of a staple, ironically. It's funny. Yeah. So, I freaking love this movie. It's, it's in the top 250 movies on IMDb. It's on a ton of, 100 movies, 101 movies before you die. You must watch this. It's on all those types of movies. I don't think it won any Oscars or anything. No, it didn't. And the second one did, but it was mainly more effects and stuff and more below the line stuff. But I rewatching it recently, it's coming to theaters in my neck of the woods out here, and I really wanted to see it, but it just didn't line up, unfortunately, with our podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that'd be an awesome movie to see in theaters. If the second one comes out in theaters, I'm for sure going to go see that.
Absolutely.
Because I've been getting into that lately. I was like, it's cool to go see old movies in the theaters. And that's the whole point, again, of this podcast, is revisiting or seeing this stuff for the first time and appreciating it more, or not appreciating it if it doesn't hold up. So far, I don't think we've gotten to one that hasn't held up,
Yeah, I don't think so.
That we've had a couple. That we've seen.
Sorry, I sneezed.
Bless you. It froze on my end, and you just disappeared.
Oh.
You went to the future.
Yeah.
To 2029.
Yeah, what were we talking about? Movies and theaters? Yeah. It's cool.
Movies that held up.
Movies that held up. Yeah.
That sneeze needed to send you back in time, not to the future.
Yeah, right.
Stupid.
Yeah, we've had a couple that we were not necessarily thrilled with.
But
nothing that I would say was just didn't even merit any kind of viewing yet.
Yeah. I'm surprised because I've watched some other movies recently that I'm like, I remember this as a kid and I freaking loved it. Like Scary Movie 2. I just watched that recently and I was like, this movie's fucking dog shit. I remember laughing my ass off as a kid to that and not anymore. So I'm glad this movie held up, and I highly suggest, especially if you haven't seen it, see it, and if you've seen it, see it again, because it fucking rocks.
Yeah, it's great. It actually kind of exceeded my expectations.
Same.
Like I said, I've seen it, but it's been probably 15 years, if not longer. So yeah, I was and I watch T2 once a year, so it's like one of those things where I was like, okay, we'll get through this, and then I was like, damn, this is actually really good, So that's always the most fun, I think, of these that we've done, is where I'm really surprised at how good something is, especially watching it a second time, more as an adult, Yeah,
you get a different perspective.
Yeah.
Well, let us know your perspective on it, and thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, and coming up next week and for the next 4 weeks, it's going to be Halloween movies.
Yeah.
So get ready for that.
Not
the
off. Halloween series.
Yeah, no. Scary movies, I guess.
Yes.
Even though I don't know how scary these ones are actually going to be, but they're good, Halloween themed movies.
Yes.
So yeah, be on the lookout for those. They'll be dropping all through October.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.